She stood there drenched and shivering, holding the last box of her belongings. She thought rock bottom was the divorce papers signed yesterday. She was wrong. The roar of a V12 engine cut through the storm, and a sleek silver Bentley swerved intentionally toward the curb. A wall of filthy street water rose up, slamming into her, coating her cheap coat in black sludge. Laughter echoed from the car as it sped away. Her ex-husband thought he had just humiliated a nobody. He had no idea that the woman he just splashed was now the wife of the man who owned his entire world. This isn't a fairy tale, this is revenge. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it hammered against the pavement like it had a personal vendetta. Elowen Vance stood on the corner of 4th and Pike, clutching a soggy cardboard box that contained the remnants of 5 years of marriage. A chipped picture frame, a few novels, and a scarf she had knitted for a man who no longer loved her. She checked her watch, a cheap plastic thing, because she had pawned her vintage Omega to pay for the divorce lawyer. 5:45 p.m. The bus was late. Again. "Just keep moving, Elowen," she whispered to herself, wiping a wet strand of blonde hair from her forehead. "Just survive today." Suddenly, the distinct aggressive growl of an engine tore through the ambient noise of the city traffic. Elowen looked up, squinting through the downpour. She recognized that sound before she saw the car. It was a 2025 Bentley Continental GT Custom Silver Paint. Carter's dream car. The car she had helped him save for by skipping vacations and cooking rice and beans for 3 years. The vehicle approached the curb rapidly. Elowen stepped back instinctively, clutching her box tighter. But the car didn't slow down. Instead, it swerved sharply toward the deep puddle accumulating near the storm drain right in front of her. Sploosh! It happened in slow motion. The tire hit the water, sending a massive arching wave of oily, freezing sludge into the air. Elowen turned her shoulder, but it was too late. The cold muck slapped against her legs, her torso, and splashed right across her face. The Bentley screeched to a halt 10 yards ahead. The tinted window rolled down. Carter Brooks sat in the driver's seat wearing an Italian suit that cost more than Elowen's current net worth. Beside him sat Sophia, his former secretary and current fiancée, giggling behind a manicured hand. "Oops," Carter called out, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Didn't see the trash on the curb there. You blend right in, Elowen." Sophia leaned over, her red lipstick perfectly applied. "Carter, honey, don't be mean. Maybe give her a few dollars for the dry cleaners. Oh, wait, that coat isn't worth cleaning." Elowen stood frozen, the muddy water dripping from her chin onto the collar of her beige trench coat. The humiliation burned hotter than the freezing rain. Passers-by stared, some with pity, others with amusement, recording the scene on their phones. "What do you want, Carter?" Elowen's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "Just wanted to make sure you knew your place." Carter sneered, the charm vanishing from his face. "I heard you're staying at that rundown motel on 8th. Pathetic. You walked away from me, and for what? To become a beggar, I told you, Elowen. Without me, you're nothing." He revved the engine. "I'm meeting the board of directors at Thorne Enterprises tonight. Big things happening, Elowen. Millions on the table. While you're scrubbing mud off your shoes, I'll be drinking champagne with the elite. Don't wait up." With a final thunderous rev, the Bentley peeled away, spraying a final mist of water as it disappeared into the traffic. Elowen didn't cry. She had cried enough 6 months ago when she found Sophia's lingerie in her bed. She had cried when Carter drained their joint savings account by accident. Today she simply took a deep breath, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a handkerchief to wipe the mud from her eyes. "Thorne Enterprises," she murmured, watching the taillights fade. A strange, bitter smile touched her lips. "He's going to Thorne Enterprises." She looked down at her ruined coat. Carter thought this was the end of her story. He thought she was defeated. He didn't know that the rundown motel was a cover. He didn't know that the phone in her pocket was a secure line. And he certainly didn't know that the meeting he was bragging about, the one with the mysterious CEO of Thorne Enterprises, was a meeting she could cancel with a single text message. Because yesterday, in a quiet, judge-free ceremony in a private chapel in Tuscany, Elowyn Vance had legally become Elowyn Thorne. Elowyn walked 2 blocks away from the busy intersection, turning down a quieter side street where the shadows stretched long. She tossed the soggy cardboard box into a recycling bin. She didn't need the past anymore. A black limousine, indistinguishable from the other high-end town cars in the city, except for the small, discreet emblem of a hawk on the rim, sat idling in a no-parking zone. As soon as she approached, the rear door opened. A tall, imposing man in a dark gray suit stepped out holding a massive black umbrella. This was Marvin, the head of security for the Thorne family. He didn't look at the mud on her clothes with judgment. He looked at it with professional assessment. "Ma'am," Marvin said, shielding her instantly from the rain. "Mr. Thorne is waiting." Elowyn slid into the back seat. The interior was a different world, warm, smelling of rich leather and faint sandalwood. The noise of the city vanished, replaced by the soft hum of the climate control. Sitting on the other side of the cabin was James Thorne. At 34, James was the enigma of the Western business world. He was the owner of Thorne Enterprises, a conglomerate that had its hands in everything from tech to shipping. The tabloids called him the Silent King because he rarely gave interviews and never ever lost a deal. He had dark hair, sharp features that looked carved from granite, and eyes that were usually cold until they landed on Elowyn. He looked up from his tablet, and his expression darkened instantly as he took in her appearance. The mud on her cheek, the stained coat, the shivering. James didn't ask what happened. He simply set the tablet down, his movements precise and dangerous. He reached into a compartment, pulled out a warm plush towel, and moved across the seat to sit beside her. "Who?" James asked. His voice was low, a baritone rumble that vibrated in the quiet cabin. It wasn't a question of curiosity. It was a question of targeting. Elowyn accepted the towel, dabbing at her face. "Carter." James's jaw tightened. He took the towel from her gently and wiped a smudge of dirt from her neck himself. His hands, usually so ruthless in the boardroom, were incredibly tender with her. "He splashed me with his car," Elowyn said, a dry laugh escaping her. "He wanted to remind me that I'm trash. He said he's going to a meeting at Thorne Enterprises tonight to close a deal." James's hands paused. He looked at her, his dark eyes narrowing. "He's meeting with my acquisitions team regarding the Brooks Logistics merger." "He seems to think it's a done deal," Elowyn said, leaning back against the leather seats, finally feeling safe. "He told me he'd be drinking champagne while I scrubbed my clothes." James pressed a button on the intercom. "Marvin?" "Yes, sir," came the voice from the front. "Contact the legal department. Pause the acquisition of Brooks Logistics. And get me the security footage from the intersection of 4th and Pike from the last 20 minutes. "Right away, sir." James turned back to Elowyn, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, pulling her into the warmth of his suit. "He won't be drinking champagne, Elowyn. I can destroy him before dinner." "No," Elowyn said softly, placing her hand on James's chest. "Don't destroy him yet. Not like that." James looked at her, intrigued. "You want mercy. I want justice," Elowyn corrected, her eyes hardening. "If you cancel the deal now, he'll just think it's bad luck or business. He won't know it was me. He needs to know James. He needs to realize that the trash he splashed mud on is the woman holding his leash." James smirked, a rare expression that made him look devastatingly handsome. He kissed her forehead. "So what do you propose, Mrs. Thorne?" "Let the meeting happen," Elowyn said. "In fact, I want to be there. But not as Elowyn Thorne, not yet. I want to be there as his consultant." "He fired you from his life," James noted. "Exactly. But he's desperate. I know the numbers of his company better than he does. He cooked the books last year to hide assets during our divorce. If I walk into that gala tonight, he'll be terrified I'm going to expose him. He'll try to kick me out. He'll make a scene." "And when he does," James asked. "Then?" Elowyn smiled. "You introduce your wife." James pulled out his phone. The annual Thorn Charity Gala is tonight at the Grand Ritz. He's on the guest list because he's a prospective partner. I'll make sure you have a horrific seat right at his table." "Perfect," Elowen whispered. "One condition." James said, his thumb grazing her cheekbone. "You wear the red dress, the one I bought you in Milan, and you wear the sapphires." "That's a lot of attention for a nobody," Elowen teased. "You're not a nobody," James said fiercely. "You are the queen on this chessboard, and tonight we take the pawn." The car turned smoothly toward the towering glass spire of the Thorne residence. Elowen watched the city blur by. Carter was probably laughing right now, drying off his Bentley, toasting to his future wealth. He had no idea that the mud he splashed had just started a landslide that would bury him. The Grand Ritz ballroom was a sea of velvet, silk, and diamonds. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. The Thorn Charity Gala was the event of the season in Seattle, where the city's billionaires rubbed shoulders with politicians and celebrities. Carter Brooks strode into the room like he owned it. Sophia was on his arm, wearing a silver gown that was a little too tight and a little too sparkly for the occasion. She looked around wide-eyed, clearly out of her depth, but trying to hide it with arrogance. "Keep your chin up," Carter hissed at her. "And stop staring at the chandeliers. Act like you belong here." "I do belong here," Sophia snapped. "Is that the CEO, the old guy?" "No, you idiot, that's the mayor. James Thorne hasn't arrived yet. He always arrives last." Carter adjusted his bow tie. He was nervous. His logistics company, Brooks Logistics, was bleeding money. He had hidden the losses well, but he needed this merger with Thorne Enterprises to save his skin. If this deal fell through, the creditors would come for the Bentley, the house, and everything else. He spotted his table 4. It was near the front, a good sign. "Come on," Carter said, guiding Sophia through the crowd. "Let's sit and—" He froze. Sitting at table 4, calm and composed, sipping a glass of sparkling water, was Elowen. She looked different. Gone was the soggy trench coat. She was wearing a dress that Carter didn't recognize, a deep blood-red velvet gown that hugged her curves and pooled elegantly on the floor. It looked vintage or custom. Her hair was swept up in an intricate chignon exposing her neck. And around her neck, Carter blinked. It looked like a sapphire necklace. A big one. But it had to be fake. Elowen barely had money for rent. She certainly couldn't afford jewelry that heavy. "What is she doing here?" Sophia screeched, though she tried to keep her voice down. "Did she follow us?" Carter's face turned red. He marched up to the table. "Elowen, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Elowen didn't stand up. She slowly rotated the stem of her glass and looked up at him with bored indifference. "Hello, Carter. Sophia, you're late." "This is a private event," Carter spat, looking around to see if security was nearby. "Tickets are $5,000 a plate. Did you sneak in through the kitchen? Or are you working as a waitress?" "I'm a guest," Elowen said calmly. "Just like you." "Bullshit." Carter slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. A few heads at nearby tables turned. "You're trying to embarrass me in front of Thorne's people. You're trying to sabotage my deal." "You don't need my help to sabotage your deal, Carter," Elowen said, her voice ice cold. "Your fraudulent Q3 financial report will do that for you." Carter's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" "I know you inflated the overseas shipping revenue," Elowen said, leaning forward. Her eyes sparkled with dangerous intelligence. "I know you moved the debt to the shell company in the Caymans. I was your accountant for 5 years, remember. I know where the bodies are buried." Carter panicked. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Listen to me, you miserable leech. You keep your mouth shut. If you say one word to anyone from Thorne Enterprises, I will ruin you. I will sue you for everything you don't have. Get your hands off her." The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the ballroom like a gunshot. Carter froze. He turned around. Standing behind him was a man he had seen only in magazines. He was taller than Carter, broader, and radiated an aura of absolute power. He wore a tuxedo that fit perfectly, and his eyes were fixed on Carter's hand on Elowen's arm. It was James Thorne. Mr. Thorne, Carter stammered, instantly releasing Elowen and stepping back. He wiped his sweaty palms on his pants. I didn't see you there. What an honor. James didn't look at Carter. He looked at Elowen. Is this man bothering you? Carter laughed nervously, stepping in between them. Oh no, Mr. Thorne. This is just my ex-wife. She's mentally unstable. She crashed the party. I was just about to call security to have her removed so she doesn't disturb your evening. Sophia chimed in, batting her eyelashes. Yes, it's so embarrassing. She's been stalking us. James's gaze finally shifted to Carter. It was a look of pure disgust. You want to remove her? James asked. Yes, immediately, Carter said, gaining confidence. She doesn't belong here. Well, look at her. She's nobody. James took a step forward, invading Carter's personal space. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. It is fascinating, James said, his voice carrying to the surrounding tables which had gone silent, that you wish to remove the guest of honor. Carter blinked. I'm sorry, guest of honor. James walked past Carter and extended his hand to Elowen. May I? Elowen smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that Carter hadn't seen in years. She placed her hand in James's. He helped her stand, and then in front of the frozen crowd, in front of a horrified Carter and Sophia, the billionaire tycoon leaned down and kissed Elowen's hand. You look breathtaking, my love, James said. He turned to the room, placing a possessive hand on the small of Elowen's back. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced, his voice booming, I would like to introduce you to the new co-owner of Thorne Enterprises, my wife, Mrs. Elowen Thorne. The silence that befell the Grand Ritz ballroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. 300 pairs of eyes belonging to tech moguls, heiresses, and senators darted between the trembling figure of Carter Brooks and the regal stance of Elowen Thorne. Carter's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. His brain was misfiring. Wife. It was impossible. He had divorced her 6 months ago. She was destitute. She was buying groceries with coupons. How could she be standing there, draped in velvet and sapphires, holding the hand of the most powerful man on the West Coast? This is a joke. Carter sputtered, his voice cracking. He looked desperately at the people at the nearby tables. You're all being played. She's a fraud. She's a manipulator. Sophia, realizing her social ladder was burning down beneath her heels, tried to distance herself. She took a half step away from Carter, but James's gaze pinned her in place. A fraud, James repeated, his voice dangerously calm. You accuse my wife of deception. I accuse her of being a gold digger, Carter shouted, losing his composure entirely. She trapped you. She knew you were rich. She's nothing but a washed-up accountant who couldn't keep a husband. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Insulting the host was bad form. Insulting James Thorne's wife was social suicide. Elowen didn't flinch. She squeezed James's hand, signaling him to wait. She stepped forward, the heavy sapphire necklace catching the light. She looked at Carter, not with anger, but with a pity so profound it cut deeper than hatred. You're right, Carter, Elowen said, her voice clear and amplified by the acoustics of the room. I was an accountant. I balanced your books. I managed your household. I saved every penny so you could buy that silver Bentley, and when I had nothing left to give, you threw me away. Because you were boring, Carter yelled, sweat beading on his forehead. You were dead weight. And what did you do today to the dead weight? Elowen asked softly. Carter froze. Elowen turned to James. Darling, perhaps we should show our guests the entertainment we prepared. I think it speaks to the character of the man asking for their business. James nodded to a technician in the corner. Play it. Behind the stage, a massive 4K LED screen, usually reserved for charity impact videos, flickered to life. The grainy but high-definition footage from the dashboard camera of a nearby Tesla, which Marvin, the head of security, had procured within the hour, filled the room. The scene was undeniable. The rain, the lone woman on the corner, the silver Bentley approaching. The audio was crisp. "Oops, didn't see the trash on the curb there." "Carter, honey, don't be mean." "Oh, wait, that coat isn't worth cleaning." The splash was magnified on the giant screen. The wave of black sludge hitting Elowen. The laughter from the car. The video cut to black. The ballroom was dead silent. Then the murmurs started, a mixture of disgust and shock. He did that to a woman. Isn't that his ex-wife? That's barbaric. And he wants to manage our logistics. He has no judgment. Carter felt the room shrinking. He turned to Sophia, but she was already backing away, shaking her head. "I told him not to," she lied loudly to a woman at the next table. "I told him it was cruel." "Sophia," Carter hissed. Elowen stepped closer to Carter, closing the distance until she was just a foot away. She smelled of expensive vanilla and victory. "You said I was trash, Carter," she whispered low enough that only he could hear. "But trash is something you throw away. I'm not trash. I'm the landfill, and I'm about to bury you." James stepped up beside her. "Mr. Brooks, you are trespassing on private property. And regarding the acquisition of Brooks Logistics..." James paused, letting the tension build. "Thorne Enterprises does not partner with men who abuse women. The deal is dead." "You can't do that," Carter shrieked. "We have a verbal agreement, my investors." "Your investors will see this video by morning," James said coldly. "Marvin, show Mr. Brooks and his guest the exit." Two large security guards materialized from the shadows. They grabbed Carter by the elbows. He struggled, his dignity completely shattered. Elowen, wait!" Carter shouted as he was dragged backward, his heels scuffing the polished floor. "We can talk about this. I was just stressed. Elowen, please." Elowen didn't look back. She turned to her husband, who wrapped his arm around her waist. "Shall we dance, Mrs. Thorne?" James asked. "I'd love to." Elowen smiled. As the orchestra struck up a waltz and the couple moved to the center of the floor, Carter Brooks was thrown out into the rain, the same rain he had used as a weapon just hours before. But this time there was no Bentley waiting for him. The valet, under instructions from James, had misplaced his keys. The hangover from the gala was brutal, but the reality of the next morning was worse. Carter sat in his office at Brooks Logistics. It was 9:00 a.m. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle gray and washed out. His phone had been ringing non-stop since 6:00 a.m. Investors, the bank, the tabloids, the video of the splash had gone viral. "Het Bentley bully" was trending on Twitter. "It will blow over," Carter muttered to himself, popping an aspirin. "It's just bad PR. The numbers are still solid. If I can just get James Thorne in a room man to man, I can explain. He's a businessman. He cares about profit, not his new wife's feelings." His intercom buzzed. It was his assistant, Jessica. Her voice sounded shaky. "Mr. Brooks, the delegation from Thorne Enterprises is here." Carter straightened his tie. "Good. Send them in. Is James with them?" I don't know, sir. They just walked past me." The double doors to his office swung open. Carter stood up, putting on his best winning smile. "Gentlemen, I'm glad we could put last night's misunderstanding behind." The words died in his throat. It wasn't James Thorne. Walking into the room, flanked by 4 lawyers in sharp navy suits, was Elowen. She wore a cream-colored power suit that screamed executive authority. Her hair was pulled back in a severe professional ponytail. She carried a leather portfolio, not a purse. She didn't look at Carter. She walked straight to the head of the conference table, his table, and sat down. The lawyers took the seats around her, opening their laptops in synchronization. "You're in my chair," Carter said, confused. "I'm in the chair of the majority debt holder," Elowen corrected, opening her portfolio. Sit down, Carter. We have a lot of discrepancies to cover. What are you talking about? James was supposed to buy the company, not... James is busy running an empire, Elowen said, not looking up from her papers. He appointed me as the interim auditor for this acquisition. And frankly, Carter, your books are a work of fiction. Carter sank into a side chair. You can't do this. You're just an accountant. Exactly. Elowen looked up, her eyes razor sharp. I'm the accountant who knows you list your vacation home in Aspen as a corporate training facility for tax write-offs. I know you're paying Sophia a consultant fee of $80,000 a year despite her only qualification being shopping. And I know about the Caymans. The color drained from Carter's face. The Caymans account is private. Not when you use company funds to capitalize it. Elowen signaled to one of the lawyers. The lawyer slid a document across the table. Mr. Brooks, this is a formal notice of a forensic audit initiated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Based on an anonymous tip received late last night, they are investigating Brooks Logistics for embezzlement and fraud. Carter's hands shook as he picked up the paper. You reported me. I fulfilled my civic duty, Elowen said coolly. But here is the situation, Carter. Thorne Enterprises has bought out your loans from Citibank this morning. We now own your debt, all $12 million of it. And since you are in breach of contract due to the fraud investigation, we are calling in the debt immediately. I don't have $12 million cash, Carter whispered. We know, Elowen said, which leaves you two options. She leaned forward, clasping her hands. Option A. We proceed with the lawsuit. You go to federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. The company is liquidated. You lose everything and you spend the next 10 years in a cell. Carter swallowed hard. And option B. Option B. Elowen said, sliding a second document across the table. You sign full control of Brooks Logistics over to Thorne Enterprises for the price of $1. You resign immediately. You vacate your company-owned house by midnight. And you leave Seattle. $1, Carter choked. This company is my life. This company was built on my unpaid labor and your lies. Elowen shot back, her voice rising for the first time. I crunched the numbers, Carter. I stayed up late fixing your mistakes while you were out networking with Sophia. I built this foundation. You just put your name on the door. She uncapped a heavy fountain pen and set it on the document. Sign it, Carter, or I make the call to the FBI right now. Carter looked at the pen. He looked at the lawyers who were watching him like sharks. He looked at Elowen. There was no love left in her eyes. Only the cold, hard calculation of a woman who had been pushed too far. He thought about prison. He thought about the orange jumpsuits. With a trembling hand, Carter Brooks picked up the pen. He signed his name. Smart choice, Elowen said, snatching the paper away before the ink was dry. She stood up. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to pack your personal effects. Do not touch the computers. Elowen, Carter said, his voice small, broken. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Elowen paused at the door. She looked back over her shoulder, replicating the exact pose she had on the street corner. I hear the motel on 8th Street has vacancies, she said. But bring a raincoat. It's pouring out there. Carter stumbled out of the office building carrying a single cardboard box. It was a poetic, cruel symmetry. Just 24 hours ago, he had watched Elowen holding a box just like this. Now it was his turn. He walked to the reserved parking spot where his Bentley usually sat. It was empty. A tow truck was just pulling away with the silver beast hooked up to the back. Hey, that's my car. Carter ran after it, dropping his box. Papers spilled onto the wet pavement. The tow truck driver leaned out the window. Bank repo order, buddy. Talk to Thorne Enterprises. Carter stood in the middle of the parking lot, rain beginning to drizzle again. He needed to get home. He needed to talk to Sophia. They still had the jewelry he bought her. They could sell it, get a fresh start somewhere else. Maybe Mexico. He hailed a cab, a humiliating experience for a man who hadn't taken public transport in a decade, and gave his home address. When he arrived at the sprawling modern mansion on the cliffs overlooking the Sound, the front door was wide open. "Sophia!" Carter called out, rushing inside. The house was trashed. Not by vandals, but by a frantic packer. Drawers were pulled out. The art was missing from the walls. The safe in the study was wide open and empty. He ran to the bedroom. Sophia was there, struggling to zip up 2 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases. "Sophia! Thank God!" Carter gasped, leaning against the doorframe. "It's a disaster. Elowen, she took the company. She took the car. We have to go. We have to leave now." Sophia didn't look up. She yanked the zipper shut with a grunt. There is no we, Carter." Carter blinked. "What do you mean we're engaged?" Sophia stood up and finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the affection she used to fake so well. "I was engaged to the CEO of Brooks Logistics. I was engaged to a man with a Bentley and a future. I wasn't engaged to a broke fraud who gets humiliated on the internet." "But I love you," Carter said, his voice sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "And you love me. You said I was your soulmate." Sophia laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Carter, please. I'm 24. I don't have time for love with a bankrupt man. I saw the news. You're done. You're radioactive." She dragged her suitcases past him. "Wait. The jewelry." Carter grabbed her arm. "The necklace I gave you last week, the diamond bracelet. We can sell them. That's at least $50,000. It's enough to start over." Sophia yanked her arm away. "Those were gifts. They're mine. Consider it severance pay for putting up with your snoring for 6 months. She walked to the front door. Outside, a black Porsche Cayenne was waiting. The driver was a man Carter recognized, a rival logistics owner, older, balder, but definitely richer. "Sophia!" Carter screamed, running onto the porch. "You can't do this. I left Elowen for you." Sophia paused at the car door. She looked back at him, the rain matting Carter's expensive haircut to his forehead. "And look how that turned out," she smirked. "You should have treated her better, Carter. Maybe then she wouldn't have destroyed you. But thanks for the diamonds." She slammed the car door. The Porsche sped away, leaving Carter Brooks standing alone in the driveway of a house that wasn't his anymore, with a bank account that read $0 and a heart that was finally truly breaking. He sat down on the wet concrete steps and buried his face in his hands. The silence of the empty house behind him was deafening. He realized with a terrifying clarity that he was the mud, and the rain had finally washed him away. 6 months had passed since the downfall of Carter Brooks. The scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by the next big celebrity gossip, but for Carter, the nightmare was his daily reality. The rain was falling in Seattle again. It was a cold November Tuesday. Carter sat in the driver's seat of a dented 2016 Honda Civic. The check engine light was on, glowing an ominous orange on the dashboard. The smell of stale French fries and wet dog, courtesy of a previous passenger, permeated the upholstery. He wasn't the CEO of Brooks Logistics anymore. He wasn't a member of the city's elite. He was driver number 4922 for Quick Dash, a food delivery app. "Recalculating?" The GPS voice droned. "I know where I'm going." Carter snapped at the phone mounted on his dashboard, his voice hoarse. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. He couldn't afford a doctor, and his health insurance had vanished along with his company. His phone pinged. New order pickup from Le Monde. Delivery to 1400 Highland Drive. Carter's stomach dropped. 1400 Highland Drive was the Thorne estate. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the decline button. He couldn't go there. He couldn't face them. But then he looked at his fuel gauge. He was running on fumes. If he didn't take this high-value order, he wouldn't have enough gas to get back to the studio apartment he was subletting in the industrial district. "Swallow your pride, Brooks," he muttered. "You're just a delivery guy. They won't even look at you." He picked up the food, 4 bags of expensive seafood and steak from the city's best restaurant. The smell made his mouth water. He had been eating instant noodles for weeks. The drive up the winding hill to the Thorne estate was torture. He remembered driving this road in his Bentley, fantasizing about the day he would be invited here as a peer. Now he was coming to the service entrance. He pulled up to the massive iron gates. He pressed the intercom button. "Delivery for Thorne," he said, trying to disguise his voice. The gate buzzed open. Carter drove up the long driveway, the gravel crunching beneath his worn-out tires. The house was glowing with warmth. He could see silhouettes moving behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. It looked like a gathering, a celebration. He parked and walked to the front door, head down, cap pulled low. He just wanted to drop the bags and run. He rang the doorbell. The heavy oak door swung open. It wasn't a maid or a butler who answered. It was Elowen. She looked radiant. She was wearing a soft cashmere sweater and jeans, holding a baby monitor in one hand. She looked younger, happier, and more alive than she had ever looked during their 5 years of marriage. She looked at the bags of food, then up at the delivery driver. Time seemed to stop. Carter froze. He wanted to turn and run, but his feet were lead. He slowly lifted his head, locking eyes with her. "Here's your order," Carter whispered, his voice cracking. Elowen stared at him. She didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She didn't look angry. She looked unbothered. "Thank you," she said politely. She reached out and took the heavy bags from his trembling hands. "Elowen," Carter choked out. He couldn't help himself. "It's me." Elowen paused. She tilted her head slightly as if trying to recall a distant memory. "I know who you are, Carter. Would you like a tip?" The question hit him harder than a slap in the face. She wasn't treating him like an ex-husband she hated. She was treating him like an employee. I don't want your money," Carter stammered. I wanted to say—" What did he want to say? "I'm sorry. Take me back. I made a mistake." "The food is getting cold," Elowen said, her voice mild. "And my husband is waiting. Drive safely, Carter. The roads are slippery tonight." She turned around. "Wait." Carter stepped forward desperately. "Don't you hate me? After everything I did, don't you want to scream at me?" Elowen stopped. She turned back slowly, one hand resting on the door frame. "Hate you?" she asked, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. "Carter, why would I hate you if you hadn't splashed me with that mud, if you hadn't divorced me? I never would have met James. I never would have started my own firm. I never would have found out what real love feels like." She looked him up and down, taking in his shabby clothes and the desperation in his eyes. "You gave me the greatest gift of my life," she said softly. "You set me free. So no, I don't hate you. I don't think about you at all." She closed the door. The heavy thud of the latch echoed in the night air. Carter stood there on the porch alone. The silence of the estate was overwhelming. He realized then that hate isn't the opposite of love. Indifference is. She had moved on so completely that he didn't even register as a threat or an enemy. He was just the past. He walked back to his dented Honda. The rain started to fall harder. As he turned the key, the engine sputtered and died. He banged his head against the steering wheel, sobbing into the dashboard as the lights of the warm, happy house shone in his rearview mirror, a paradise he had thrown away with his own 2 hands. The heavy oak door clicked shut, severing the connection between 2 worlds. On one side was the biting cold of the Seattle night, where Carter Brooks stood trembling on the porch, staring at the wood grain of the door that had just closed in his face. On the other side was the warmth of the Thorne estate, a sanctuary of golden light, soft jazz, and the scent of expensive cedarwood. Inside, Elowen leaned her back against the door, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Her heart wasn't racing with fear, nor was it pounding with anger. It was beating with a steady, rhythmic calm that surprised her. She had expected this moment, the inevitable confrontation with the ghost of her past, to be explosive. She had imagined screaming at him, listing his crimes, watching him grovel in the dirt. But now that it had happened, the rage was gone. It had simply evaporated, replaced by a profound sense of closure. "Elowen." James's voice was low, laced with immediate concern. He emerged from the library, a glass of vintage Pinot Noir in his hand, his dark eyes scanning her face for any sign of distress. He set the glass down sharply on the console table and crossed the foyer in 3 long strides. "Who was it?" James asked, his hands gently gripping her shoulders. "I saw a car on the security feed, an old sedan. Did they bother you?" Elowen looked up at her husband. In his eyes she saw the fierce protectiveness that had defined their relationship from the moment he handed her a towel in his limousine. He was ready to tear the world apart for her. "It was just the delivery, James," she said softly. "And it was Carter." James's jaw tightened instantly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Carter Brooks here." He turned toward the door, his hand reaching for the intercom to summon Marvin and the security team. "I'll have him removed. I'll have him arrested for trespassing. The audacity of that man to show his face at my home." "No," Elowen said, placing a hand on his chest to stop him. "Don't. He hurt you, Elowen. He humiliated you." "He did," Elowen agreed. She turned and walked toward the living room window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain to peer out into the darkness. "But look at him, James." James moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Together they looked out at the circular driveway. The rain was coming down in sheets now, a relentless deluge that blurred the landscape. In the center of the storm sat the battered Honda Civic. The headlights were dim, flickering weakly against the onslaught of the rain. Inside they could see the silhouette of a man slumped over the steering wheel, his shoulders shaking. Carter wasn't leaving. The car had died. Outside in the freezing cabin of the vehicle, Carter Brooks was experiencing a hell of his own making. He turned the key in the ignition for the 10th time. Click, click, click. The engine didn't even whine. It was dead. Just like his career. Just like his marriage. Just like his future. He slammed his hands against the steering wheel, a guttural scream tearing from his throat, but the sound was swallowed by the drumming of the rain on the metal roof. He was trapped. He couldn't go back to the door. He couldn't face her pity again. He couldn't call a tow truck. His credit card had been declined at the gas station this morning for a $3 coffee. He had exactly $12 in cash in his pocket, and a tow would cost $200. He looked up at the house. Through the sheer curtains he could see the warm glow of the chandelier. He saw 2 shadows standing together in the window. He knew it was them. The king and queen of Seattle looking down at the peasant in the mud. The memory of that day on the corner of 4th and Pike crashed into him with the force of a physical blow. He remembered the feel of the leather steering wheel of his Bentley. He remembered the power he felt as he swerved. He remembered laughing as the water hit her. Oops, didn't see the trash there. He squeezed his eyes shut, hot tears leaking out to mix with the grime on his face. He wasn't the driver anymore. He was the trash. The universe hadn't just punished him. It had dismantled him piece by piece to show him exactly how small he really was. Inside the mansion, James watched the scene with a cold, calculated expression. "He's stranded," James noted without sympathy. "Fitting. Let him walk back to the city in the rain. It's poetic justice." Elowen watched the broken man in the broken car. She thought about the anger she had carried for months. It was a heavy stone she had been dragging around, waiting to throw it at him. But now, looking at him, she realized she didn't want to throw the stone. She just wanted to put it down. "If we leave him there," Elowen said quietly, "we are no better than he was. He left me in the rain, James. If I leave him in the rain, I become him." James turned her around to face him. He studied her face, searching for any lingering affection for her ex-husband. He found none. He saw only a grace that humbled him. "You are a better person than I am, Elowyn Thorne," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "What do you want me to do?" "Call the towing company," she said. "The best one. Have them pick him and the car up. Pay for the tow. Pay for the repairs. And have the driver take him home." "You want to fix his car?" James asked, raising an eyebrow. "I want him gone," Elowyn corrected. "And I want him to know that he didn't break me." "Kindness is the ultimate power move, isn't it?" James smirked, pulling out his phone. "That it is." 20 minutes later, the flashing orange lights of a heavy-duty tow truck cut through the darkness. Carter, shivering violently in his thin jacket, watched in confusion as the massive vehicle backed up to his Honda. A burly driver in a yellow slicker hopped out and tapped on Carter's window. "You call for a tow," the driver shouted over the wind. Carter rolled the window down an inch. "No, I didn't call anyone. I can't afford it. Go away." The driver chuckled, hooking a chain onto the Honda's bumper. "Bill's already paid, buddy. Full service. Tow to the shop and a ride home for you. You got a guardian angel in that big house." Carter froze. He looked back at the mansion. The curtains were drawn now. The light was still on, but the window was empty. A guardian angel. Fresh tears streamed down his face. It wasn't just money. It was mercy. He had splashed her with mud, and she had responded by lifting him out of it. It was a kindness so undeserved that it burned worse than any insult. As the truck hoisted his car into the air, Carter climbed into the passenger seat of the cab. As they pulled away, driving down the long, winding road away from the estate, he didn't look back. He couldn't. But he made a silent vow to the empty night. He would find a new job. A real one. He would work. He would pay it forward. He would try for the first time in his life to be a man worthy of the mercy he had just received. Back inside the Thorne residence, the silence of the storm's aftermath was peaceful. Elowyn walked up the grand staircase, the plush carpet soft beneath her feet. She entered the nursery at the end of the hall. The room was painted in soft pastels smelling of lavender and baby powder. In the crib, their daughter, baby Lily, was beginning to stir. James was already there, leaning over the rail, his large finger being gripped by a tiny hand. "She's awake," James whispered as Elowyn entered. Elowyn walked over and picked up the baby, cradling her close. She walked to the window. The storm had finally broken. The clouds were parting, revealing a brilliant full moon that cast a silver light over the wet gardens below. "The car is gone," James said, standing beside her, wrapping his arm around both his wife and daughter. "Good," Elowyn said. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of her family. "You know," James mused, looking at the moon, "they say rain on your wedding day is good luck because a wet knot is harder to untie. I think rain on the day you finally let go of the past is lucky too." Elowyn smiled, looking at the reflection of the three of them in the glass. She thought about the mud that had ruined her coat that day. She thought about how she had cried on the bus. She thought about how that moment of absolute despair had led her to this moment of absolute joy. "It wasn't just rain, James," she said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "It was a baptism. The old Elowyn washed away so this one could be born." She looked down at Lily, who was cooing softly, her eyes wide and trusting. "And I like this Elowyn much better," she added. James kissed her temple. "So do I, my love. So do I." Outside, the last drop of rain fell from the eaves of the roof, landing in a puddle below. The water rippled, clearing slowly until it reflected the moon bright and unbroken. The storm was over. The mud was gone. And for Elowyn Thorne, the sun was just about to rise. And that is the story of Elowyn and Carter. It's a powerful reminder that the wheel of fortune is always turning. Carter thought he was on top of the world when he splashed mud on Elowyn, but he didn't realize that arrogance is often just the first step of a long fall. Elowyn's journey teaches us that the best revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's just becoming so happy and successful that the people who hurt you no longer matter. What would you have done if you were in Elowen's shoes? Would you have helped fix Carter's car at the end? Or would you have let him stay stranded in the rain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, drama, and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload brand new dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.